Welcome back to our series on Scottish Church history, and we're in the 19th century. And previously we looked at the revivals that had such a big impact and the social consequences of that transformed our nation and actually far beyond that from Scotland. And now we're going to look at home mission, what was actually going on in the nation of Scotland, particularly in the capital city of Edinburgh. There were two key events in Scottish Church history which galvanised mission on a large scale. 1796, when the Reverend John Erskine, who had pioneered the concerts of prayer for revival and awakening, challenged the Church of Scotland Assembly. And this was about mission, which led to a flurry of 57 mission societies being pioneered in Scotland between 1796 and 1824. And the second main year was 1824 itself, when the percentage of evangelicals came to dominate the Church of Scotland Assembly. Among leading voices was the Reverend Dr. Thomas Chalmers. From 1824 onwards, we see the growth of a united, concerted effort of evangelicals to reach the whole of Scotland with the gospel. The Reverend Dr. Thomas Guthrie said the Church was shaking off the drowsy, deadening rain of moderatism. In 1815, Dr. Chalmers wrote that there was an impetuous and overbearing contempt for everything connected with the name of missionary. The cause had been outraged by 1,000 indecencies. All the epithets of disgrace which a perverted ingenuity could devise had been unsparingly lavished on the noblest benefactors of the species. A great proportion of our nobility, gentry, and clergy look upon it as a very low and drivelling concern, as a visionary enterprise, and that no good thing can come out of it. However, everything had changed decades later. Chalmers could write, "There never was an age of the world in which a more effective machinery for conversion was in the shape of schools and Bibles and missionaries put into operation." Chalmers had a rare gift as a spiritual general of missionary strategy, both for home and abroad. His model of splitting a parish into manageable districts in Glasgow and Edinburgh, which would be regularly visited by the local churches, took off in Scotland. And by the 1820s, it was running effectively. His church extension campaign in 1834 was an ambitious project to build hundreds of new churches in Scotland, with a slogan, "A church and a minister within easy reach of every door." Another major player in home mission was David Naismith. Inspired by Chalmers' vision for reaching the local community, David Naismith from Glasgow set up the City Missions movement to reach local populations, especially the poorest areas, where most people did not go to church. He launched the first city mission in Glasgow with the call, "May the glory of God and the salvation of souls be our chief, our only end." At the first annual meeting on the 1st of January 1827 in the Trades Hall, Glassford Street, Glasgow, the message to the first missionaries was, "You will convert the houses that were tenanted by men of the foulest passions into churches of the Redeemer, where the Lord the Spirit will dwell, and the God of salvation will be loved and served. You will arrest the progress of vice and promote the interest of virtue. You will make our poor, our ignorant, our degraded population stand forth in all that freshness and fairness of moral and of spiritual excellence." There were three revolutionary ingredients to Naismith's vision. The missionaries would evangelize our cities. Number one, when the churches mostly believed the lie that Britain was Christian and didn't need missionaries at all. Secondly, using ordinary men and women without theology degrees, which was unheard of. And three, using evangelical Christians from all the church denominations working together in unity when people said it would be impossible. When the Edinburgh City Mission was established in 1832 in 375 High Street opposite St Giles, there were only a few struggling missionaries serving the poor in soup kitchens. By 1875, there were 130 missionaries working together across the churches to thoroughly evangelize the city of Edinburgh of a population of 200,000. This movement had been spearheaded by Edinburgh City Mission's 30 to 40 missionaries who led the way in united prayer meetings, united evangelism, and united social action. Naismith's trumpet call to unite all denominations of Christians and by one strong effort to pluck sinners as brands from the burning was really happening. One missionary could record in his journal in 1861 that multitudes who would formerly have resented any direct inquiry respecting their state before God began eagerly to court opportunities of being conversed with on this topic, and some would even follow the missionary to his house or accompany him on a walk to the country, pressing in various forms the momentous inquiry, "What must I do to be saved?" Another missionary wrote in 1873, "I have seen more of the Lord's mighty doings during the past 3 months than I expected to see in this life. Nearly 100 persons have met around our tea table for converse and for Bible instruction, and nearly all of whom profess to have got pardon through faith in Jesus." The impact that David Naismith had was not just only on Glasgow and Edinburgh and Scotland, but also right the way through in London and other parts of the world, and particularly amongst the areas of the poor where there were no church clergy going at all. These missionaries would go right into the dens of wickedness and the filth and the degradation of these places, and they would earn the respect and the love of the people as the missionaries came alongside them. In fact, they had such a big impact leading this movement, and other Christians who were inspired by them copied their style, that the Lord Shaftesbury, who was such a powerful politician in changing the plight of the poor in Britain, wrote about David Naismith. He spoke about David Naismith at Edinburgh City Mission Convention in 1874. He said, and it was quoted in their annual report, "Were it not, says his lordship, for the London City Mission and other kindred associations, I really know not what would be the condition of the metropolis of London. But I am certain of this, that if God had not put it into the heart of excellent men like David Naismith, of whom all Scotsmen may well boast, some 35 years ago, to found and carry on the London City Mission and kindred institutions, the metropolis of London and a very large proportion of the Empire of Great Britain would have been totally uninhabitable by anyone who pretended to civilization, morality and religion. I remember the great revolution of 1848, when, as you know, every throne was in the dust. I remember after that day talking with Monsieur Guizot, who had been Prime Minister of France. When he said, 'I will tell you what saved your empire, it was not your constables, it was not your army, it was not your ministers, it was the deep, solemn religious atmosphere. It is the religion of England that saved the Empire of Great Britain.' He was right. Sir George Grey said to me, 'I am satisfied as Secretary of State that London could not have been kept in order had not the state of mind been prepared by the operations of associations such as these.'" And so we see a Scotsman from Glasgow having such a big impact, not only just in Scotland, but also in the heart of the British Empire at the time, in London. And the work of God through him and those working with him prevented revolution. In this period, I mentioned an extraordinary evangelical Christian unity which broke out, which John Wesley had longed for and never saw in his time in the 18th century. Thomas Chalmers, as ever, was at the forefront of envisioning the church and pressing for evangelical unity. Through his inspiration, the Evangelical Alliance was established in 1846 to forge gospel unity in Scotland in order to reach the whole nation. Open-air meetings in Edinburgh would regularly occur, in which between 10,000 to 15,000 people would gather to hear the preaching of ministers from different denominations, different churches, and they were working together in unity for God's kingdom. The Monthly Visitor, as it was called, was a society, and they produced this leaflet called the Monthly Visitor. And so the actual society was named after the leaflet because it became so popular in Scotland, especially in Edinburgh. The Reverend Dr. John Erskine had not only provoked sleepy churches to prayer and mission, he led by example, and he pioneered some mission societies, including the Edinburgh Society for the Publishing of Religious Tracts, which was founded in 1793. Out of this inspiration grew the Edinburgh Society for Monthly Distribution of Tracts in 1833. In fact, the locals were so endeared by this society that they called it by the name of the tract, and so the society became known by that same name. This ministry played a critical part in sowing the gospel through monthly tracts throughout the whole city of Edinburgh, to rich and the poor alike. The tracts were written in a range of styles to suit every type of person, from, as they say, from the peer in the palace to the beggar in the street. By 1899, the report tells us that 55,281 tracts were distributed in Edinburgh every month. And this was in a population of 200,000, and that every family was being reached, with a total annual number of 663,376 tracts being annually distributed. There was a sense of triumph as the workers approached the 20th century. The report for 1899 says the number of distributors engaged in the work exceeds 1,000, that's in Edinburgh, and we are gradually overtaking the whole of the city, and hope that we may be able to state that this has been done before the new century begins. This was not only happening in Edinburgh and Glasgow, but throughout most of Scotland. By 1899, they could also celebrate the great army of 10,000 co-workers across Scotland and beyond, that their 810 titles of tracts were being distributed worldwide to millions. Out of this huge united prayer gatherings in places like the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh, which led to extraordinary revivals, came united evangelism and united social action. The incredibly hard work of evangelical Christians saw the nation filled with schools, savings banks, alcohol recovery units, food, clothing, coal, medical care and education for the poorest families, adult literacy classes, loan libraries, rehousing of the poor from the slums to decent accommodation, rehab centres for recovering prostitutes, job centres, and much more. Edinburgh itself became a breadbasket of books and literature. Thomas Nelson, a Christian, founded eventually what became the largest publisher of Christian books in the world. He began as a second-hand bookseller in 1798 next to Edinburgh's Royal Mile at 2 West Bow, with his business taking off later through publishing. Today, Nelson's Publishers is based in America, being also a subsidiary of HarperCollins. The latter publisher is one of the 5 leading giants in the world for producing English literature, beginning its life in 1819 in Glasgow with William Collins, a dedicated Presbyterian Christian, whose partner was Charles Chalmers, the younger brother of Dr. Thomas Chalmers. If you look at the inside cover of many Christian books published between 1790s and the 1890s, you will often discover that they are Scottish, and especially of Edinburgh or Glaswegian origin. Just as Dr. Erskine had been an enthusiastic disseminator of Christian books throughout Britain and America, so too did the Christian publishers, having a huge impact on shaping world history. In 1809, the Scottish Bible Society was formed in the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, firstly to fulfil the call to place a Bible in every home in Scotland, and then to do the same in every country of the world. Thomas Chalmers was again the key person developing a Christian worldview from Scotland. As we have seen on other lectures, Christians were leading in every area of life in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, which then filtered out through most of Scotland. The Christians understood that it was not enough only to preach the gospel and seek to convert people to Christ. Thorough follow-up had to happen, both with the teaching and with the practical care and support in all sorts of ways. So thus we see an extraordinary movement that took place in Scotland through the evangelicals, especially in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And this model, this Christian worldview that went right the way through our nation, would be taken to nations far away, to Africa, to Asia, to South America and beyond. And that will be the subject of our next talk.